The radar screen flickered in the pre-dawn darkness of forward operating base Keating, nestled in the brutal mountains of eastern Afghanistan. Major William Graves leaned forward, squinting at the blip that shouldn't exist. His coffee had gone cold an hour ago. The signature was wrong, too low, too fast, moving through terrain that would shred any aircraft foolish enough to attempt it. His communications officer, Lieutenant Rodriguez, pressed his headset tighter against his ear, face draining of color. "Sir, we have an unauthorized flight path through the Quarangle. Single aircraft. Call sign." He paused, consulting his log with trembling fingers. "Reaper 7. Graves felt his stomach drop. He knew that call sign. Everyone in theater knew it, though most pretended they didn't. The name belonged to Captain Nadia Volkov, a A-10 Thunderbolt pilot who'd been flying combat missions since before half his staff had graduated high school. She was 42, old by fighter pilot standards, with a service record that read like fiction and a reputation that made commanders uncomfortable. The daughter of a Ukrainian refugee and a Chicago mechanic, she'd clawed her way through every obstacle the military could throw at a woman who refused to stay grounded. Graves grabbed the radio handset. "Reaper 7, this is Overlord Actual. You are not cleared for that approach. Acknowledge." Static crackled back. Then her voice calm as morning frost. "Overlord Reaper 7, I have visual on the target compound. Multiple heat signatures. They're packing up to move." "Negative Reaper 7, RTB immediately. We have fast movers inbound in 40 minutes for a coordinated strike." Another pause. Graves could picture her up there in the cockpit, hands steady on the stick, eyes scanning the canyon walls that rose like teeth on either side of her aircraft. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, affectionately called the Warthog, was a beast built around a gun, designed for low-altitude close air support. It was tough, ugly, and brutally effective. But this was suicide. "Overlord, they'll be gone in 40 minutes. Intel says this is our HVT, the one who's been coordinating the roadside bombs." She meant the high-value target they'd been hunting for 6 months. The ghost who'd killed 17 American soldiers and vanished into the mountains like smoke. Graves closed his eyes. Every fiber of his command training screamed at him to order her back. But he'd read the reports. He'd seen what happened when Volkov got a target in her sights. The canyon walls glowed orange as the first rays of sunlight kissed their peaks, but down where Nadia flew, darkness still reigned. She banked the A-10 hard right, feeling the aircraft respond with the heavy, reassuring solidity that had kept her alive through 4 deployments. The Warthog wasn't graceful. It was a flying tank with titanium bathtub armor wrapped around the cockpit and engines mounted high to avoid ground fire. It growled through the sky at speeds that made modern fighter jocks laugh, but when the bullets started flying, she'd take this beast over anything else in the inventory. Her helmet display painted the world in shades of green. Below, the target compound clung to the mountainside like a parasite, 3 buildings arranged in a U-shape around a dirt courtyard. Thermal imaging showed figures moving with purpose, loading vehicles. She'd been tracking this cell for 2 weeks, watching their patterns, learning their rhythms. The intelligence analysts had missed the signs, but Nadia had flown enough missions to recognize the pre-movement checklist. They were rabbiting, and if they made it into the deeper mountains, they'd disappear for another 6 months while more kids got shredded by IEDs on Highway 1. Her wingman should have been with her. That was protocol, doctrine, the way things were supposed to work. But Captain Marcus Webb had called in sick that morning with what everyone knew was a diplomatic illness. He'd made his feelings clear in the ready room 2 days ago. Flying with Volkov was a career liability. She pushed too hard, took risks that made the risk management officers wake up sweating. Following her into hot zones was a ticket to either a court-martial or a flag-draped coffin. So she'd gone alone, signing out her bird before dawn, telling the crew chief she was running a maintenance test flight. Now here she was, committed, the canyon walls so close she could count the strata in the ancient rock. Rodriguez's voice crackled in her headset. "Reaper 7, be advised we're picking up radio chatter from your area. Multiple hostile communications. They know you're coming." Of course they did. The A-10's engines weren't exactly subtle, and sound bounced around these canyons like a pinball. Nadia toggled her weapon selector, feeling the aircraft's weight shift as the GAU-8 Avenger rotary cannon spooled to life. 7 barrels, each capable of firing 65 rounds per second of 30 depleted uranium shells. The gun was so powerful that firing it actually slowed the aircraft down. She'd fired it in anger 23 times over her career, and each time the sound, a deep, ripping BRRRT that resonated in your chest cavity, had been both terrifying and beautiful. The compound erupted with activity as she completed her approach run. Small arms fire sparkled from the rooftops, tracer rounds arcing up like angry fireflies. They were shooting blind, spraying the sky with AK-47 fire that had almost no chance of hitting anything. Almost. The A-10 could take punishment that would down any other aircraft, but luck and bullets were unpredictable partners. Nadia dropped her altitude another 50 feet, so low now that her landing gear almost scraped the canyon floor. Major Graves was screaming in her ear, his professional composure finally cracking. "Reaper 7, you are ordered to break off. Break off now," she keyed the mic with her thumb. "Overlord, I have positive ID on the HVT. He's in the courtyard heading for a vehicle. If I don't take this shot, he's gone." What she didn't say was that she could see him clearly now through her targeting pod, a tall man in dark clothes, moving with the confident stride of someone who'd never faced real consequences. He was shouting orders, gesturing for his men to hurry. Around him, fighters scrambled to load weapons and supplies into 2 Toyota pickups. She knew his file by heart. Abu Hamza al-Masri, though that wasn't his real name. None of them used their real names. He was 34, educated in Pakistan, radicalized in a Saudi-funded madrasa, and responsible for improvising the bomb design that had killed Staff Sergeant David Chen 3 months ago. Chen had been 23, engaged to a schoolteacher in Ohio, and had 3 weeks left on his deployment. The IED had been buried under a culvert on a road his convoy traveled every Tuesday. The bomb makers were learning, adapting, and this man was their teacher. Nadia lined up her shot, compensating for wind shear and the A-10's forward momentum. The targeting reticle drifted across the courtyard, painting the scene in digital crosshairs. She could abort, pull up, climb out of this death trap of a canyon, and let the fast movers do their sanitized strike from 30,000 feet with GPS-guided munitions that would arrive after the compound was empty. She could follow orders, play it safe, and nobody would blame her for not accomplishing the impossible. Her finger rested on the trigger, feeling the slight resistance that was all that stood between intention and action. The radio exploded with crosstalk as half the command center tried to intervene. She heard Graves, heard Rodriguez, heard someone from Air Operations Group screaming about rules of engagement and authorization protocols. But underneath all that noise, she heard something else, the memory of Chen's memorial service. His fiancée had flown in from Ohio, a small woman with red-rimmed eyes who'd held Chen's mother's hand throughout the ceremony. The chaplain had said the usual things about duty and sacrifice, but none of it meant anything to the hole that boy's death had torn in the world. Nadia had stood in the back, still in her flight suit, and made a promise that felt more sacred than any oath she'd taken at her commissioning. The A-10 shuddered as she squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 Avenger roared to life with a sound that seemed to tear reality itself. In 2 seconds, she fired 130 rounds of 30 ammunition. The recoil was tremendous, pushing against the aircraft's forward momentum. Through her cockpit canopy, she watched the results play out in brutal slow motion. The depleted uranium rounds tore through the compound like the hand of God. The first pickup truck disintegrated in a shower of metal and flame. The second exploded as rounds found its fuel tank. The building facades crumbled under the onslaught, centuries-old mud brick offering no more resistance than paper. And in the center of the courtyard, the tall man in dark clothes simply ceased to exist, there one moment and converted to physics the next. Secondary explosions began as stored ammunition and explosives cooked off. Nadia pulled hard on the stick, banking the A-10 into a climb that pushed her down into her seat. The canyon walls flashed past, close enough to see individual rocks and scrub vegetation. Small arms fire still chased her, but now it was panicked and uncoordinated. She'd killed their leader and destroyed their logistics in a single pass. Whatever resistance remained in that compound would be disorganized and demoralized. The A-10 clawed for altitude, engines screaming. Behind her, a pillar of black smoke rose from the canyon like a funeral pyre. She was breathing hard, adrenaline singing in her veins, but her hands were steady on the controls. This was what she was built for, what all the years of training and combat had refined her into. Not a woman trying to prove herself in a man's world, not a diversity checkbox on some Pentagon spreadsheet, but a weapon delivery system that happened to be housed in human flesh. Major Graves was still talking, but his tone had changed. The anger was gone, replaced by something like awe mixed with dread. Reaper 7, status report. Nadia checked her instruments. Minor damage to her left stabilizer from small arms fire, nothing critical. Fuel was lower than she'd like, but sufficient to reach base. Overlord, Reaper 7 is Code 1. Target compound is destroyed. Confirming 1 HVT KIA along with approximately 12 to 15 hostile combatants. Secondary explosion suggests significant weapons cache detonation. Request battle damage assessment when smoke clears. There was a long pause. She could imagine the command center, everyone staring at the feed from the surveillance drone that had been loitering at high altitude. They just watched what would be analyzed and debated for months in after-action reports. Reaper 7, RTB. We'll deal with this on the ground. Nadia allowed herself a small smile as she pointed the A-10's nose toward home. Deal with this. That meant paperwork, interviews, possibly a formal investigation into her unauthorized deviation from flight protocols. There would be conversations about chain of command and the importance of coordinated operations. Some colonel from the Judge Advocate General's office would review the footage and determine whether she'd violated rules of engagement. But none of that mattered because the mission was accomplished. The bomb maker was dead. The compound was rubble. And somewhere in Ohio, a schoolteacher who would never become a military wife could sleep a little easier knowing that the man who'd killed her fiancé had faced justice. The sun was fully up now, painting the Hindu Kush in shades of amber and gold. From up here, Afghanistan was almost beautiful, ancient mountains that had watched empires rise and fall, that had absorbed the blood of Macedonians, Mongols, Soviets, and now Americans. The land didn't care about any of them. It just endured. Nadia understood endurance. Her father had taught her about it, working double shifts at the auto repair shop to keep food on the table and his daughter in flying lessons. Her mother had shown her, rebuilding a life in a country whose language she barely spoke, leaving everything behind in Kiev when the Soviet Union began its collapse. They'd given her a gift, the stubborn, bloody-minded refusal to quit when things got hard. The approach to Fob Keating was textbook perfect. Nadia brought the A-10 in smooth and steady, the runway rising to meet her like an old friend. The landing gear touched down with barely a bump, and she guided the aircraft to its parking spot with the easy confidence of someone who'd made this approach hundreds of times. The crew chief, a grizzled master sergeant named Davies who'd been maintaining A-10s since the First Gulf War, was waiting with his ground crew. He signaled her through the shutdown procedure, and as the engines wound down to silence, she could see his expression, respect mixed with concern. He'd been around long enough to know when a pilot had done something spectacular and potentially career-ending. Nadia popped the canopy and climbed down, her legs slightly unsteady after 3 hours in the cockpit. The morning air was already heating up, promising another scorching day. Davies approached with his checklist, but his eyes were scanning the aircraft for damage. "Captain, looks like you picked up some hits on the left stabilizer. Caught yourself some small arms fire." She nodded, pulling off her helmet and running a hand through sweat-dampened hair that she kept regulation short. "Yeah, they were awake down there. Nothing major, but give her a good once-over before the next flight." "Yes, ma'am." He paused, lowering his voice. "Word is you splashed that canyon compound, the one they've been trying to hit for months." News traveled fast on a fob. The radio chatter would have been heard by half the base personnel who were on duty. Target of opportunity, Sergeant. Wrong place for them, right place for me. Davies allowed himself a slight grin. Well, ma'am, for what it's worth, there's about 50 infantrymen on this base who will be buying you drinks once word gets around. That cell's been making their lives hell. She wanted to tell him that she didn't do it for gratitude or recognition, that the mission was its own reward. But that would sound self-righteous, and Davies deserved better than platitudes. Instead, she just nodded. Make sure she's ready to fly again soon. This war's not taking a day off. As she walked toward the command center, Nadia was aware of eyes following her. Other pilots, ground crew, support staff, all of them had heard something by now. Some looks were admiring, others skeptical, a few openly hostile. She'd been dealing with those looks her entire career. When she'd entered flight school, she'd been one of 3 women in a class of 42. The instructors had been professional but distant, waiting for her to wash out. Her classmates had been split between those who treated her like a mascot and those who treated her like a threat. Major Graves was waiting in his office, a cramped space lined with maps and situation reports. He was mid-40s, career officer with a Ranger tab and a reputation for running a tight operation. When Nadia entered and saluted, he didn't immediately return it. Instead, he stared at her with an expression that mixed fury, frustration, and something else she couldn't quite identify. Sit down, Captain Volkov. She took the offered chair, keeping her back straight and her expression neutral. This was the part where the consequences arrived. Graves leaned back in his chair, which creaked in protest. That was the most reckless, insubordinate, dangerous piece of flying I've seen in 20 years of military service. Nadia said nothing. He wasn't looking for a response yet. You violated established flight protocols. You ignored direct orders to return to base. You engaged a target without proper authorization or backup. You flew a attack profile through terrain that's killed better pilots than you for reasons nobody can even fully articulate. He paused, picking up a report from his desk. You also eliminated a high-value target that's been responsible for 17 American KIAs and God knows how many wounded. You destroyed a weapons cache that intelligence estimates would have supplied insurgent operations for the next 6 months. And you did it with a single gun run that the Air Force Academy is probably going to use in training videos for the next decade. Nadia kept her face carefully neutral, but she felt a flicker of something, relief, maybe, or validation. Graves set down the report and leaned forward. I should court-martial you. I should ground you immediately and send you home on the next transport with a letter in your file that would end your career. That's what the book says I should do. Yes, sir. But if I do that, I lose the best close air support pilot in theater. I lose someone who's proven they can accomplish missions that everyone else says are impossible. And I lose any credibility I have with the infantry companies who are already calling you a goddamn hero. He rubbed his eyes, suddenly looking much older than his years. Tell me, Captain, why did you do it? And I want the real answer, not some speech about duty or the mission. Nadia considered her response carefully. She could give him the safe answer, the one that would sound good in a report. But Graves had asked for truth, and she owed him that much. Sir, I've been flying combat missions for 16 years. I've watched good people die because we were too slow, too cautious, too worried about perfect solutions to messy problems. 3 months ago, Staff Sergeant Chen got killed by a bomb that Cell made. He was a good kid. Great sense of humor. He showed me pictures of his fiancée, told me about the restaurant he wanted to open when he got home. She paused, choosing her next words with care. This morning, I had a chance to make sure that bomb maker never killed anyone else. I knew the fast movers wouldn't arrive in time. I knew that if those vehicles left that compound, we'd lose him again. So I made a choice. Maybe it was the wrong choice according to doctrine, but it was the right choice for the mission. Graves was quiet for a long moment. Outside, she could hear the sounds of the base coming fully alive. Helicopters spinning up, vehicles moving, the distant pop of small arms fire from the range. How old were you when you decided you wanted to fly? The question caught her off guard. 6, sir. My father took me to an air show in Chicago. I saw an A-10 demonstration and I knew that's what I wanted to do. Your file says your mother is Ukrainian, came over in the early 90s. Yes, sir. Kiev. She was a civil engineer there. Spent 10 years working as a night janitor in America before she got her credentials recognized and could practice again. Graves nodded slowly. I did some reading on you after you got assigned to my command. You know what I found? You've been the only woman in almost every unit you've served with. You've been passed over for promotion twice. You've had 3 different commanding officers write in their evaluations that you're too aggressive and take unnecessary risks. And yet you're still here, still flying, still getting the job done. Nadia wasn't sure where this was going, so she remained silent. You want to know what else I found? Your kill record against enemy targets is the highest in your squadron. Your maintenance crew says you treat your aircraft better than most pilots treat their spouses. And every single enlisted person who's worked with you says the same thing, that you actually give a damn about bringing them home alive. Major Graves stood and walked to his window, looking out over the base. In the distance, the mountains loomed beautiful and deadly. I'm not going to court-martial you, Captain Volkov. I'm not even going to formally discipline you, though I should. You know why? No, sir. Because I need pilots who can make those impossible calls, who can see an opportunity and take it, even when it means bending the rules. War isn't fought by people who color inside the lines. It's fought by people like you, people who are willing to bet everything on a single run through a canyon because they know it's the right thing to do. He turned back to face her. But I need you to understand something. Every time you fly like that, you're rolling dice that could cost you your life. You're good, Volkov. Maybe the best A-10 pilot I've ever seen. But luck runs out. Skill runs out. One day you're going to push too hard and the universe is going to push back. Nadia met his eyes. Yes, sir. I understand. I don't think you do, but that's a conversation for another day. Right now, you're grounded for 72 hours. Not as punishment, but because you need rest and this base needs to process what happened. The intelligence analysts are going over the drone footage and there's going to be a formal after-action review. You'll cooperate fully and you'll be respectful even when they ask stupid questions. Clear. Crystal, sir. Good. Dismissed. She stood, saluted, and turned to leave. As she reached the door, Graves called out one more time. Captain, sir. That was some damn fine flying. Don't ever let anyone tell you different. Outside, the heat hit her like a physical force. Nadia made her way to her quarters, a small plywood and sandbag structure she shared with Captain Jennifer Moss, an intelligence officer. The room was Spartan, 2 cots, 2 footlockers, a small desk with a laptop and nothing else. Moss wasn't there, probably off analyzing the morning's mission data. Nadia sat down on her cot and allowed herself a moment to feel the weight of what she'd done. Her hands were shaking slightly now, the adrenaline finally wearing off. She'd killed at least a dozen people this morning. She'd destroyed buildings and equipment. She'd violated orders and risked her career and possibly her life. And she'd do it again tomorrow if the mission required it. Sleep wouldn't come, though her body screamed for it. Nadia lay on her cot, staring at the plywood ceiling and listening to the rhythms of the base. After an hour of restless quasi-consciousness, she gave up and went to find food. The dining facility was crowded with the lunch rush, soldiers in dusty uniforms, contractors in civilian clothes, a handful of Afghan interpreters clustered at their usual table. She grabbed a tray of something that was theoretically chicken and rice, then looked for a quiet corner to eat. Captain Volkov, over here. She turned to see Lieutenant Marcus Webb, her wingman who'd conveniently been too sick to fly that morning. He was sitting with 3 other pilots from their squadron, all of them younger than her by at least a decade. Webb was 28, fresh-faced and eager, with the kind of confidence that came from never having truly been tested. His call sign was Slider, earned after an incident involving ice and an embarrassing crash during a squadron cookout. Against her better judgment, Nadia carried her tray to their table. The conversation died as she approached, 4 pairs of eyes tracking her movement. She sat down, focusing on her meal. Hell of a morning, Webb said, his tone carefully neutral. Heard you went Winchester on that canyon compound. Winchester was pilot slang for being out of ammunition. It wasn't technically accurate. She'd only fired a portion of her gun's capacity, but the spirit was right. Target of opportunity, Nadia replied, the same words she'd used with the crew chief. Yeah, well, some opportunity. Word is you disobeyed direct orders from Overlord Actual. This came from Captain Thomas Wright, call sign Prophet. He was 31, a decent pilot with a mediocre record and an outsized opinion of his own tactical judgment. Nadia looked at him directly. I engaged a time-sensitive target that was preparing to flee. I assessed the situation and made the call that the mission objective outweighed procedural protocols. That's a fancy way of saying you went cowboy and got lucky, Prophet said. You could have been shot down. Could have started an international incident if you'd hit the wrong building. Could have gotten a lot of people killed if that compound had been hosting civilians. It wasn't hosting civilians. Intelligence had confirmed it as a military target. Intelligence is wrong all the time. You know that. Nadia set down her fork, her patience thinning. Are you making a point, or are you just upset that I accomplished in one pass what this squadron couldn't do in 6 months? The table went very quiet. Prophet's face flushed red, and for a moment Nadia thought he might actually escalate. But Webb jumped in, his tone diplomatic. Nobody's upset, Captain. We're just concerned. You're a valuable asset to this unit, and flying solo into hot zones without backup puts that asset at risk. That's all Prophet's saying. It was a lie, but a kind one. Nadia appreciated the attempt at peacemaking even if she didn't buy it. I appreciate the concern, she said, keeping her voice level. But I've been flying combat missions since before some of you finished high school. I know how to assess risk and make tactical decisions. This morning I made the call that needed to be made. If you disagree with that call, take it up with Major Graves. I've already had that conversation. She stood, taking her half-eaten tray with her. As she walked away, she heard Prophet mutter something she couldn't quite make out, followed by Webb shushing him. It didn't matter. She dealt with worse than petty jealousy and bruised egos. But as she dumped her tray and headed back out into the heat, Nadia couldn't shake a familiar feeling. The isolation that came from being different, from refusing to fit into the neat boxes that made everyone else comfortable. She'd felt it at the academy, felt it through flight school, felt it in every squadron she'd ever been assigned to. The price of excellence was loneliness, and she'd been paying that price for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to be part of a real team. The next 2 days crawled past. Grounded, Nadia found herself with time she didn't want and thought she didn't need. She worked out in the base gym until her muscles screamed. She read intelligence reports until the words blurred together. She wrote emails to her parents that she didn't send because she couldn't figure out how to explain what she was doing out here. Her mother would understand the duty part but worry about the danger. Her father would be proud, but that pride would be tainted with fear every time he saw a news report about Afghanistan. On the 3rd day, she was summoned back to Major Graves' office. When she arrived, she found him with Colonel Patricia Anderson, the Air Operations Group Commander. Anderson was a legend, 54 years old, one of the first women to fly combat missions in the Air Force, with a career that included Desert Storm, Bosnia, and 2 tours in Iraq. She had short gray hair, sharp eyes, and a presence that made junior officers stand straighter. Colonel Anderson gestured for Nadia to sit. Captain Volkov, I've spent the last 72 hours reviewing the footage of your canyon strike. I've also read your service record, Major Graves' report, and statements from about 30 different people who all seem to have opinions about you. Nadia kept her expression neutral, waiting. I'm here to ask you one question, and I want an honest answer. Do you think you're too good to follow orders? The question hung in the air like smoke. Nadia considered it carefully. The easy answer was no, of course not. She respected the chain of command. But Anderson had asked for honesty, and her career had taught her that senior officers who asked for honesty usually knew when they were getting a lie. Ma'am, I think I'm good enough to assess tactical situations in real time and make decisions that optimize mission success. Sometimes that means deviating from the original plan, but I've never disobeyed an order for selfish reasons or ego. Every call I've made has been in service of the mission and the people depending on me. Anderson studied her for a long moment. When I was your age, I was flying F-16s in Iraq. One mission, we got redirected to provide close air support for a Marine unit that was getting chewed up by Iraqi armor. Standard procedure was to wait for clearance from the ground controller before engaging. But the radio traffic was chaos, and I could see through my targeting pod that the Marines were about to get overrun. So I made a choice. I dropped my ordnance on those tanks without explicit clearance, killed the Iraqi armor, saved the Marines, and got my ass handed to me by my squadron commander for the next month. She leaned forward. You know what I learned from that? There's a difference between being reckless and being decisive. Reckless is taking risks for the wrong reasons, showing off, proving something, feeding your ego. Decisive is seeing the situation clearly and having the courage to act even when the consequences might be severe. The trick is knowing which one you're being. Nadia nodded slowly. And how do you tell the difference, ma'am? Honestly, sometimes you can't, not in the moment. But afterwards, you look at the results and you ask yourself, would I make the same call knowing what I know now? If the answer is yes, you were decisive. If it's no, you were reckless. Would I make the same call again? Nadia repeated the question more to herself than to the colonel. Yes, ma'am, every time. That compound needed to be eliminated and I was in position to do it. Waiting would have meant losing the target. Colonel Anderson exchanged a glance with Major Graves. Something unspoken passed between them, a conversation conducted entirely in expressions and subtle nods. Finally, Anderson spoke again. The after-action review came back. Intelligence confirms you destroyed the target compound and eliminated Abu Hamza al-Masri. The secondary explosion suggests you also took out approximately 300 kilograms of explosives, multiple weapons, and ammunition that would have supplied insurgent operations for months. From a purely tactical standpoint, your mission was a complete success. She paused, pulling out a folder from her briefcase. However, you did violate established protocols. You flew an unauthorized combat mission. You ignored direct orders to return to base. You engaged without proper authorization or backup. Under normal circumstances, this would result in disciplinary action ranging from a formal reprimand to possible court-martial. Nadia felt her stomach tighten, but she kept her face impassive. This was the hammer falling, the consequences she'd known were coming. However, Anderson continued, these are not normal circumstances. This is a counterinsurgency operation in some of the most challenging terrain on Earth, against an enemy that doesn't follow any rules we'd recognize. The mission requires flexibility, initiative, and pilots who can think independently when situations develop faster than command can respond. She opened the folder, revealing official-looking documents with multiple signatures. After consultation with the Theater Air Operations Center and General Morrison himself, we've decided to take no disciplinary action against you. Instead, your mission is being classified as a justified tactical deviation under fluid operational conditions. In English, that means you saw an opportunity, you took it, and it worked out. Don't make a habit of it. Relief flooded through Nadia, though she was careful not to show it too openly. Yes, ma'am, understood. Good, because there's something else. Anderson pulled out another document, this one with fewer pages but more weight. Your squadron is being tasked with a new mission. There's a network of insurgent training camps in the Tora Bora region. Intelligence suggests they're preparing for a major offensive to coincide with the spring fighting season. We need detailed reconnaissance and precision strikes to disrupt their preparations. Major Graves took over the briefing. This won't be like your canyon run, Captain. This will be coordinated, by-the-book operations with full mission planning and multiple aircraft. But you're going to be flight lead. Nadia blinked, surprised. Flight lead meant being responsible for the entire mission, coordinating with other aircraft, making real-time tactical decisions for the whole package. It was a position of trust and authority, usually reserved for more senior captains or junior majors. Sir, I'm honored, but there are other pilots with more time and grade. None of them can fly like you, Graves interrupted. And none of them have demonstrated the tactical judgment to handle complex fluid situations. You proved in that canyon that you can assess a situation, make a decision, and execute under pressure. That's exactly what we need for these missions. Colonel Anderson stood, signaling the meeting was ending. You're being given an opportunity, Captain Volkov. Don't waste it and don't make me regret this decision. The eyes of a lot of senior officers are going to be on your squadron over the next few months. Prove that what happened in that canyon wasn't luck. Prove that you're as good as you think you are. Nadia stood and saluted. I won't let you down, ma'am. After they were dismissed and Colonel Anderson had left, Graves motioned for Nadia to sit back down. He pulled out a bottle of whiskey from his desk drawer against regulations, but a tradition as old as military aviation itself, and poured 2 fingers into a coffee mug. You don't drink on duty, I know, but you're still grounded for another 6 hours, so technically you're off duty. Drink. She took the mug, the whiskey burning smooth and warm down her throat. Graves poured himself the same measure. I'm going to tell you something off the record, Captain. That canyon run you made. It scared the hell out of me. Not because I thought you couldn't do it, but because I knew you could. And that's dangerous, having a pilot who's capable of pulling off the impossible, because then everyone starts expecting the impossible as the standard. He took a sip of his whiskey. But here's the thing. This war isn't going to be won by people who play it safe. It's going to be won by people who are willing to take calculated risks when the moment demands it. You're one of those people. Just make sure your calculations stay good, because the margin for error is razor thin. The next morning, Nadia was back in the air. This time, it was a standard patrol mission, flying a grid pattern over a section of Highway 1, providing overwatch for a convoy moving supplies to a remote outpost. It was routine, almost boring, but after 3 days grounded it felt like freedom. The A-10 responded to her touch like an old friend, every control surface and system exactly where it should be. She flew at 8,000 feet, high enough to avoid most ground fire, but low enough to respond quickly if the convoy ran into trouble. Below, the Afghan landscape rolled past in shades of brown and gray, punctuated by occasional green valleys where rivers provided enough water for agriculture. The convoy was a line of MRAPs, mine-resistant ambush-protected vehicles, moving at a steady pace along the highway. Nadia monitored their progress, one eye on her instruments and one eye scanning for threats. Her wingman today was Captain Sarah Chen, call sign Blade. Chen was 30, competent and professional, one of the few pilots who never seemed bothered by Nadia's presence or reputation. They'd flown together a dozen times, and while they weren't exactly friends, there was mutual respect. Reaper 7, Blade 2, got anything interesting up there? Chen's voice was relaxed over the radio. Negative, Blade 2, quiet morning. The bad guys must have taken the day off. It was pilot humor, the kind of dark joke that helped pass the time on long missions. In reality, they both knew the insurgents were out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The attack came 30 minutes later. The convoy was passing through a narrow section of highway with steep embankments on both sides when the lead MRAP exploded. The IED had been buried under the roadway, and the blast was massive, a shaped charge designed to penetrate the vehicle's armor. Nadia saw it from her altitude, the orange flash and black smoke that bloomed like a deadly flower. Overlord Reaper 7, we have contact. Convoy under attack, Highway 1, grid reference 573829. One vehicle hit, IED strike. Moving to engage. She rolled the A-10 into a steep dive, eyes scanning for the triggerman. IED attacks were usually triggered remotely, which meant someone nearby with a line of sight to the convoy. Chen followed, her aircraft descending in a coordinated pattern to cover different angles. Below, the convoy had stopped. The lead MRAP was burning, smoke pouring from its shattered hull. The other vehicles were deploying soldiers, who took up defensive positions along the roadway. Nadia could see small arms fire coming from the embankment to the east, muzzle flashes that sparkled in the morning sun. Blade 2, I have eyes on hostile positions, east embankment. Count at least 6 shooters. Copy, Reaper 7. I'll take the north approach, you take south. Affirm. Let's give these guys something to think about. Nadia brought the A-10 around in a sweeping turn, lining up her approach. The hostile positions were dug into the embankment, using the terrain for cover. They'd planned this ambush well, choosing a spot where the convoy would be vulnerable and escape routes limited. But they hadn't planned for close air support arriving this quickly. She toggled to her radio frequency for the ground controller. Anvil 6, this is Reaper 7. I have visual on your position and multiple hostile contacts on the east embankment. Request clearance to engage. The response was immediate, the ground controller's voice tight with stress. Reaper 7, Anvil 6. We are taking heavy fire from that embankment. You are cleared hot. Repeat, cleared hot. Nadia adjusted her dive angle, compensating for wind and the A-10's momentum. The enemy fighters were still shooting at the convoy, apparently unaware that death was screaming down at them from above. Or maybe they were aware but didn't care, committed to their attack regardless of the consequences. She squeezed the trigger. The GAU-8 roared, and 30mm rounds tore into the embankment. Dirt, rock, and human bodies disintegrated under the onslaught. She held the trigger for 2 seconds, then released and pulled up, the A-10 climbing away as she assessed the results. The hostile fire from the embankment had stopped. Blade 2, you're clear to engage. Watch for secondaries. Chen made her run from a different angle, her GAU-8 adding to the destruction. When she pulled up, the embankment looked like it had been chewed up by a giant predator. Any insurgents who'd survived the first pass were either dead now or running for their lives. Overlord Reaper 7. Hostile contacts neutralized. Convoy is secure. Copy Reaper 7. Ground element reports 1 KIA, 3 wounded from the initial IED strike. They're requesting medevac. Roger that. We'll maintain overwatch until the helicopter arrives. For the next 40 minutes, Nadia and Chen circled above the convoy, watching for any sign of follow-up attacks. Below, the soldiers worked to secure the area and tend to their wounded. The medevac helicopter arrived, a Black Hawk with Red Cross markings, and evacuated the casualties. The lead MRAP was too damaged to recover, so they rigged it with explosives and destroyed it rather than leave it for the enemy. The flight back to base was quiet. Nadia ran through the engagement in her mind, analyzing her decisions and execution. The attack had been handled by the book: clear communication, coordinated approach, proper identification of targets, immediate response to the ground commander's request. No violations of protocol, no unnecessary risks. Just professional close air support doing exactly what it was designed to do. And yet she felt oddly hollow. 3 Americans wounded, 1 dead. Probably 8 to 10 insurgents killed in the ambush. Numbers on a report, statistics that would be compiled and analyzed and filed away. But behind each number was a person, someone with a history, with family, with dreams that would now never be fulfilled. She'd killed before many times. It was part of the job, an unavoidable consequence of combat aviation. But it never got easier, never became routine. Each time she pressed that trigger, she was ending someone's existence, making a decision that no human should have the power to make. The only thing that made it bearable was the knowledge that she was protecting her own people, that the insurgents she killed would have gone on to kill more Americans if given the chance. After landing and debriefing, Nadia found herself with a few hours before the next briefing. She headed to the chapel, a small building at the edge of the base that saw sparse attendance. The chaplain, a soft-spoken captain named Father Miguel Rodriguez, was inside organizing supplies for an upcoming service. He looked up as she entered, his expression welcoming but not intrusive. "Captain Volkov, it's been a while. Father, I hope I'm not interrupting." "Never, please sit." The chapel was simple: folding chairs, a portable altar, religious symbols from multiple faiths arranged respectfully. Nadia sat in the back row, suddenly unsure why she'd come. She wasn't particularly religious. Her mother had been Orthodox Christian, her father a lapsed Catholic, and Nadia herself had never found much comfort in organized faith. But sometimes the weight of what she did needed to be shared, if only with empty air and a sympathetic listener. "Rough morning?" Father Rodriguez asked, sitting a few rows ahead and turning to face her. "Not particularly. Convoy ambush, we eliminated the threat, everyone came home, standard mission. But I killed at least 6 people today. Maybe more. And I did it without hesitation, without doubt. I lined them up in my sights and erased them from existence. What does that make me?" Father Rodriguez was quiet for a moment, considering his words carefully. "It makes you a soldier doing a difficult job in an impossible situation. You didn't create this war, Captain. You didn't choose for those men to attack a convoy. You responded to protect your people, which is precisely what you're trained and authorized to do. That doesn't make them less dead. No, it doesn't. And the fact that it bothers you, that you're here asking these questions, suggests you understand the weight of what you do. That's important. The day you stop questioning, the day it becomes easy, that's when you should worry. Nadia stared at the simple cross on the altar. How do you reconcile it? The commandment against killing versus the necessity of combat. I don't think you ever fully reconcile it. I think you carry the weight of it, and you trust that God understands the complexity of human conflict in ways we can't. I think you try to be as ethical and moral as possible within the constraints of war, and you hope that's enough. And if it's not enough, Father Rodriguez smiled sadly, then we pray for forgiveness and try to be better tomorrow. That's all any of us can do, Captain. Carry our burdens, learn from them, and keep moving forward. They sat in silence for a while. Outside, the base continued its endless rhythm. Helicopters, vehicles, shouted orders, the mechanical sounds of war. Inside the chapel, there was a pocket of stillness, a brief respite from the chaos. Finally, Nadia stood. "Thank you, Father. Anytime, Captain. My door is always open." She left the chapel feeling not absolved, but perhaps slightly less alone. The weight was still there, would always be there, but it was a weight she could carry. The weight was the price of doing what needed to be done, and she'd accepted that price a long time ago. That evening, there was a mandatory briefing for all pilots in the squadron. Major Graves stood at the front of the room, a detailed map of the Tora Bora region displayed on the screen behind him. The room was crowded, 12 pilots, various ranks and experience levels, all focused on the major. "All right, people, listen up. As of 0600 tomorrow, this squadron begins Operation Mountain Thunder. Our objective is to identify and eliminate insurgent training camps in the Tora Bora mountain complex." Graves clicked through several slides, each showing satellite imagery and intelligence assessments. Intel suggests there are at least 4 major camps in operation, training anywhere from 50 to 200 fighters at any given time. These aren't just local insurgents. We're seeing foreign fighters from Pakistan, Chechnya, and various Middle Eastern countries. They're training in advanced tactics, IED construction, and coordinated assault operations. He pointed to specific locations on the map. Each camp is built into the mountainside, using caves and natural cover to avoid